Welcome everyone to Assisi Animal Health's wonderful educational opportunities. Today's topic is home alone and miserable. Our presenter today is Dr. Jeff Nichol. Dr. Nichol did his undergraduate studies and graduated from the veterinary school at Michigan State University. He has been a veterinarian hospital owner and has practiced general and behavioral medicine throughout his career. Since 2015, Dr. Nichol has been specializing in behavioral issues in the treatment of disorder of pets. He has two practices in both Albuquerque and Santa Fe, New Mexico. And he also includes medical comorbidities as a common feature in that caseload. We welcome Dr. Nichol.
Well, good morning. I'm sitting here at my desk in my home office, and on one side I have a picture of my wonderful Airedale, who I obedience trained, and actually he was nationally ranked one year. We campaigned all over the Southwest, and he was this man's best friend. And I have a picture of my wife and my children with me on the other side, and I think about how all of it is part of my family. And if you didn't feel the same about your pets, I don't think you'd be here. And so when we look at some of the behaviors that dogs with separation anxiety can show, well, it is miserable, isn't it? And we are so committed to them, and they mean such a great deal to us, that when they're going through this level of distress, it's pretty tough on us. And right now, with stay-at-home restrictions and uncertainty and the economy that we're all struggling to figure out, our dogs can actually very, very clearly read our body signals. They don't just sense what's going on with us, they read us because they're watching their leader for behavioral cues. Doesn't mean to put anybody on the spot and say, straighten out and stop looking so anxious to your dog. But let's look at the realities. You've got a dog who's doing this kind of stuff, and it's pretty unsettling. One of the things that is important to impart is that just because a dog is doing some of this stuff does not mean for certain that he or she has separation anxiety. Very often you're right, but I'm going to point out a couple of things in just a minute that'll help you to nail that down so that we can make sure we're using the right treatment. And beyond all that, with dogs who have separation anxiety, which, by the way, we have very robust research that shows that there is a genetic underlying cause for many of those cases. And so I hope I understand people make the mistake of believing that the dog is trying to punish them for having left the dog at home, and that's why they wreck stuff, when nothing could be further from the truth. If you have a dog who is wigging out in your absence, you may also find, if you think through what's gone on in that dog's life, that there may be problems with noise phobias like storms, and stuff like generalized anxiety. Anxiety is an extremely common problem in dogs, and it can be manifest in a variety of ways. The brain, considered the most complex organ in the body, lots of different influences on what actually comes out behaviorally. And so, separation anxiety, yeah, there may be other kinds of anxieties too. So when we treat a problem like this, we're not looking at it as some simple little thing with one simple little solution. We look at it as having multiple moving parts, and we need to try to treat the whole creature, because we don't just want them to feel better when they're home alone. We want this dog to have a better life in as many respects as we can. And this is just a little video of a dog that I invited these folks to provide more information for me. She's pretty clearly distressed, and they didn't necessarily recognize that until they took this video. They kept her in a crate when they were away, because she had a history of damaging the house. And she had this foam rubber pad, and they couldn't really necessarily tell when they arrived home that she'd been going through this kind of frantic distress. And those vocalizations, that crying and that whining, that's been studied as well. And we understand that is a very clear sign of distress. So videos, boy, they matter. Wasn't that many years ago, you had to hire a videographer, but of course, pretty much all of us have a video camera in our pocket nowadays. You can get a Nest Cam, N-E-S-T Cam system online for about $99, and Comes with 2 cameras and an app that you can put on your smartphone so that you can see what's going on after you've left. Those things are pretty handy. But even if you don't invest in that, you can take your smartphone, and I think these folks just propped it up against a couple of books and they got that video of Chloe, and it made it possible for me to add that very important part to my history that I was gathering to make sure that, number one, I had an accurate diagnosis of separation anxiety, and I was able to custom fit our behavior management, and so we got the best level of improvement. Well, of course, now we have this excellent new treatment, and the term revolutionary, I mean, that's pretty strong language, isn't it? Well, this really is, because we know that we can improve the quality of life only if a pet can learn an alternative behavior, something that takes the place of that unhealthy, absolutely panic-driven destructiveness, crying, house soiling, digging at the door, just hypervigilance, all those things that are just not only hard to watch, but it's got to be mighty hard for the dog itself. Well, we can teach them to do different things, to shift the expression of their motivations into something much healthier, but you got to deal with that overwhelming anxiety if you're going to teach them something new. And so reducing the anxiety is the absolute foundation of making it possible for a dog like this to feel better and to function better. So historically, we've used medications. That's not a 4-letter word, by the way. We understand how these things work, and we understand how they adjust the neurochemistry that can shift what's going on. Medications don't always work. Some dogs don't tolerate them. And in fact, in some cases, there's something else that's better, and that's the CZ Calmer Canine. And this thing looks like a halo, which I think is kind of cute. But that ring has everything to do with generating the pulsed electromagnetic field that affects the fear center, the amygdala, in the dog's brain. And these things are very well researched. They come in a couple of sizes, depending on the size of the dog. You can look at this big rascal here. He's wearing this little outfit, and it comes in 2 parts. Very comfortable. I've got one for my dog, and it has a little Velcro patch at the top of the one that goes around the neck, so that the device itself, the Calmer Canine device, can just stick there. Very lightweight, so the dog isn't bothered by it. And the rest of that little vest, as it's called, holds it in place, so that twice a day, for about 15 minutes each session, and it's easy to time it because it turns itself off after 15 minutes, your dog can relax with you in the morning and again in the evening, and get these twice daily treatments. So very many dogs in a research pilot study responded beautifully to the Calmer Canine by itself. Now, some of them were already on anti-anxiety medications and had gotten some improvement, but not as much as was needed. And so they were allowed to stay on their medications. And we know, in terms of understanding how these things work, that there is no conflict. So we can go that way as well. But this is an absolute foundation piece. And the truth is that these dogs feel better. In videos, which are essential to monitoring the progress of a dog with separation anxiety, shows what's going on. So not only am I really urging you to get videos of your dog in your absence and share those with your veterinarian or with a qualified behaviorist, so that we can say, yeah, this dog has separation anxiety, or maybe this dog's got a territorial problem. Maybe there's fear of other activity in the home, like other pets or outdoor creatures, that are causing damage or other indicators when you get back home that your dog had a problem while you were gone. Let's make sure it's really separation anxiety. But let's continue to video these guys at least weekly during treatment, so that we can monitor that, yes, we're making a difference. And if we're not making the kind of difference we need to, we make a change. So using this thing, you can see in the lower left corner of this picture with this Irish setter, you can see that's that patch of Velcro that I mentioned. And then in the lower right corner, that person is just holding the device and kind of sticking it right on there, but you don't have to hang on to it after that. Then the dog can sit near you or snuggle up to you. Picture in the upper left corner is just a person who's holding it there, because maybe they decided not to invest the $25 or so in the vest. Boy, it's not a lot of money. It sure makes things easier for everybody because you know that the Calmer Canine device is where it belongs for the full 15 minutes of the treatment each time. So they talk about a treatment course of about 4 to 6 weeks. That's certainly the average, although a few of these have responded in 2 weeks. Not everybody responds, but almost everybody. It's pretty impressive. And then the other unknown, and boy, with behavior, the brain being the most complex organ in the body, we tell people what we expect to see, but that's because we want you to get back to your doctor, your veterinary behaviorist, or other qualified behaviorist and say, well, it's not going as planned. Well, we make another adjustment, okay? So some of these dogs will need another course of treatment. When? We have to pay attention. We do not cure separation anxiety, but we certainly can improve our management of it. So it is a lifelong challenge. And when you realize that most dogs are genetically programmed to have it, you understand that it's hardwired into some of these pets. But, they're such wonderful dogs. Dogs with this problem are typically the sweetest, they're the best companions that you might have ever had. This is a wonderful success story. This is Kita here. These folks got her as a rescue. And dogs who spend time in a shelter are also statistically at greater risk of separation disorders. And they created her. You can create a dog with this, but it does set them up for other problems because they need to move around. They can feel confined and trapped. A crate should be available to a dog as a den. If you're going to use a wire crate like the one with Chloe in that video, you should cover it with a towel or a blanket so the dog has that den-like feel. You don't want to get too hot in there, obviously, and you leave the door uncovered. But that door should stay open so that if the dog gets nervous in there, she can come out. I encourage people to install a dog door in the house so they can get outside. If something scares them out there, they can come back in. Don't forget, these dogs are generally pretty anxious. And so how many choices can we give them that they can do something to improve how they feel in the moment? So nonetheless, these folks initially crated Kita to prevent her from doing more damage to their house. And boy, some of these dogs can, $1,500 a day, really, can rip into the sheetrock. It's pretty horrible. So they crated her, and then she escaped the crate, so they used zip ties to prevent that. It makes logical sense to the pet parent at the time, but frankly, from a behavioral standpoint, it's better not to confine them. Nonetheless, they got started with the Calmer Canine, and they had really excellent results. And you see this picture of Kita. She's wearing the vest. You can see it around her chest. And you don't have to have the dog snuggled up to you for this thing to be working. It's really quite easy to use. So, these dogs, many of them have been struggling with separation anxiety, and their people didn't know it. And they didn't know it not because they weren't committed. They certainly are. But you come home and everything seems all right. Nobody is house soiled. Nobody's done any damage. Neighbors aren't complaining about a lot of crying and whining and all that. So why would you suspect it? Well, it turns out that when people video their dogs, one study showed the dogs who had absolutely no suggestive indicators that the people were aware of, they had them all video their dogs in their absence. And we came to learn that 30% of those dogs actually were pacing and scanning and showing very clear indicators of anxiety and stress. Well, nothing's getting damaged. Yeah, but we love our pets, don't we? I mean, we don't want them miserable. We want our pets to enjoy a peaceful and healthy quality of life. Well, your dog could have been struggling with separation anxiety before you got the stay-at-home or work from home orders due to the epidemic. And now your dog says, well, I've died and gone to heaven, haven't I? My person is home full time. This is great. Well, okay, but you will be going back to work full time, won't you? And when that shift occurs, your dog had been accustomed to the routine of you being gone during the day, perhaps hardly managing on its own. And now the dog feels better because you're home all the time. And then you abruptly return to work and a dog who had been struggling with separation issues earlier and barely managing, we anticipate that a lot of those dogs are going to lose control of themselves when their person goes back to work full time. They're suddenly home alone, and now they destabilize. Well, in anticipation of that, here's what I'm urging you to do. Number one, get some video, okay? Take a 20-minute drive in the car, drive down the street at least a few blocks so the dog has heard your car disappear into the distance. Be sure that you've done all of your pre-departure preparations, as you always do before leaving, so the dog really believes you're going somewhere. You drive away and then you have a look at that video. And if you say, you know what, I think my dog has separation anxiety, you can send that in and get that checked out. And by the way, you can attend a virtual conference that I'll be giving on these things as well. I'll mention that in a minute. You find out that, you know what, I think my dog may have a problem. Let's get ahead of this thing now so that we don't blow the lid off when I go back to work, because we have time. Order the Calmer Canine and get started ASAP. So, and by the way, you can save money on it right now too. There have been long-term, we have behavior modifications that we use. I won't go through each of these now. This is a brief webinar, but again, on my virtual conference, which you can certainly sign up for that, we can get into a lot more depth on this. These behavior modifiers are essential to long-term management because this is what teaching the dog alternative behaviors is all about. We don't just reduce their anxiety with a Calmer Canine. We want them, once they are capable of learning new things, we want them to practice new things. And we want that to be part of their permanent routine. Okay, so that's going to be essential. These are, desensitization and counter conditioning, teaching the dog that, yeah, I can get by, I can function. So this comes after, and we can, by the way, start that kind of stuff during the time that we've got the Calmer Canine underway. So, whoops, I'm advancing my slides. So if you need some extra help, I'm a veterinary behavior specialist. I'm residency trained, and if you would like my help without having to move to Albuquerque or Santa Fe, then go to my website, drjeffnichol.com, drjeff, Nichol.com, and you will see our phone number. Call my office, and my practice manager is Carolyn, and Carolyn will put you on the schedule, tell you what's available and when, and we can give you a hand by Zoom meeting. A little difference than a Zoom webinar like this, because in a Zoom meeting, these will be small groups, and you can ask particular advice about your specific pet, and I will talk to you directly in addition to all the other people, and everybody can learn from everything I'm discussing with everybody. And if you subscribe to my website, by the way, then you'll get my Facebook Live videos and my weekly question answer blog, which is published in the Albuquerque Journal. And of course, I'll send you my pet first aid